And we, of course, remind you to, besides making Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery your first listen every day, make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. Biggest stories of the day, instant reaction, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your favorite podcast from. So, all right, there's an article, and this has got me. I'm all distracted. Like, I'm all fired up about this. Okay, there's an article on NFL.com from Jeffrey Chadia, Chadiha. Okay, and they talk about making moves and the way the NFL is. Let's put it like this. Here's what they say. Team builders in the NFL today are wheeling and dealing in ways their predecessors likely never would have dreamed of. What drives some to take big swings, and how is it paying off on the Super Bowl stage? And then they go right into Thomas Dimitrov. They literally say, Thomas Dimitrov heard the sage words of advice, the concern in his mentor's voice, and then he made a bold choice to ignore all of it. Okay, so they talked to Thomas Dimitrov in this article. And Thomas Dimitrov talks about the advice that he got from Bill Belichick, talking to his mentor, Bill Belichick. And he talks about on draft day when he talked to Bill Belichick. And he said, when I talked to Bill that day, I told him that he'd always taught me to know your organization better than anybody else. When I went against this advice, that was a revolutionary moment for me. Oh, God. Okay. So obviously Thomas Dimitrov didn't know his own organization. Let's talk about first the 2011 draft. That's the Julio draft, right? Okay. Why could you draft Julio? Well, maybe Thomas didn't know it at this time. He could have asked me. I could have understood. You had your franchise quarterback in place in Matt Ryan. You had your dominant running back as the best free agent signing in the history of the Falcons, a 1,700-yard, double-digit touchdown guy in Michael Turner. You had a terrific wide receiver in Roddy White, but a guy who couldn't stretch the field. He wasn't a stretch-the-field kind of guy. And you had your offensive line in place, McClure and Claybo and guys like that. And in 2010, you had a guy that had 13 sacks who would have another 9.5 sack season in 2011, the year that you drafted Julio. So you had a guy in John Abraham that had 22.5 sacks over a 2-year period. That's more than the Falcons had last year. That's more than the Falcons had this year. You didn't know your roster. But you rolled the dice in drafting a guy, against all the advice. It made all the sense in the world. You drafted a high-caliber impact player that influenced your roster greatly, and maybe he's the best Falcons player of all time. This wasn't a scenario where, you just on a whim and just, we're not going to draft. Oh, yeah. Obviously, you didn't know your roster, Thomas. But the point is to all of this, they go into the Rams and how they're built. And I saw Jerry Jones's comment the other day that, the Eagles are just going all in and they're not thinking about the future. What? They're the Rams of this year. What? Jiminy Christmas. So how did the Eagles get to this point of they won the Super Bowl like 5 years ago? They're back in the Super Bowl. Did they just sign all free agents and go with that super team and this, that, and the other? No. They drafted Jalen Hurts and Devonta Smith and Miles Sanders and guys like that and Jordan Davis and Josh Sweat. Those are all draft picks. Those guys are all draft picks that they hit on. And then they compared to the Rams. Jerry Jones talked about the Rams, and this article talks about the Rams. The Rams said F the draft picks and all that. Yeah, when they were a Super Bowl team. 3 years before they won the Super Bowl. Let me repeat, before they won the Super Bowl, they were a Super Bowl team. Well, how did that team in, 2019, how were they built? Well, let's see, Jared Goff. Oh, they drafted him. Todd Gurley. Oh, they drafted him. Cooper Kupp. Oh, they drafted him. Aaron Donald. Oh, they drafted him. And on and on and on and on. You still have to draft your team. Why do you think Dan Quinn is being talked about for NFL head coaching? And I know he's going back to Dallas, but interviewed for head coaching jobs. Oh, he's turned the Cowboys defense around. Why? Because they drafted Micah Parsons. They drafted maybe the most dominant pass rusher we've seen since Lawrence Taylor. When you draft guys and you hit on this, and I'm going to tie this into the Falcons in a little bit here. When you draft guys, that's how you build your team. That's why the 49ers are successful. They drafted Brock Purdy. They draft Joey Bosa. Whether you draft, look, here's the thing. The Super Bowl team in Kansas City, you draft Pat Mahomes with the 10th pick of the draft. He becomes the best player in the NFL. Then last year, you drafted Creed Humphrey in the second round. And when he finishes with the highest grade of a rookie in Pro Football Focus, and then this year, he was second team All-Pro. When you hit on your draft picks, you transform your franchise. You transform it. You think it's coincidence? Look, here's the 3 things. You have good to great quarterback play, outstanding quarterback play. You have a really good offensive line and a really good defensive line. That's how you win all the time in the NFL. And when you hit on guys in the draft that transform your franchise, it changes everything. How about the Detroit Lions, right? They were the laughing stock of the NFL for so many years. What happened? They finished 9-8 this year, just missed the playoffs, but they were above 500 this year. And it's no small coincidence that 3 things happened. Jared Goff, who was cast off and traded from the Rams, and they moved on from their, franchise quarterback. Jared Goff was a Super Bowl quarterback who played really well. 29 touchdowns and 7 interceptions? And then what did they do? In 2021, they drafted Penei Sewell, who transformed their entire offensive line, who the Falcons should have drafted, but we'll get into that discussion another time. And then they drafted Aiden Hutchinson, who was a dominant defensive lineman as a rookie. So let's see. You had good quarterback play. You drafted a transformative offensive lineman, and you drafted a transformative defensive lineman. And voila, miracle above miracles, the Lions, who were the laughing stock of the NFL for years, were above 500. Have we been above 500 recently? Oh, we haven't? I don't want miss me with the whole, well, we could have won the NFC South. Miss me with that whole discussion. You've been a below 500 team for 5 years now. Falcons have been 5 years below 500. And I'm going to tie this into what the Falcons are and everything. But you still have to draft your guys. When you draft Pat Mahomes and Creed Humphrey, when you draft Aiden Hutchinson and Penei Sewell, when you draft Micah Parsons, when you draft those guys, they're young, they're cheap, they're outstanding players. The Eagles are not a one-hit wonder because Jalen Hurts has played well. Devontae Smith has played well. They're running back. I mean, go all down the list. And again, when you're a Super Bowl team, then you can say F the draft picks and we'll build a different way. But to get to that point, to get to a point of you're a good, competent franchise that's a playoff contender year over year, you have to draft well. this whole mythology and this whole revisionist history about the way things have been built. Be good at court. If you can be outstanding in three places, be outstanding at quarterback, be outstanding on the offensive line, be outstanding on your defensive line. It's no small thing that the Cincinnati Bengals drafted really well to get Joe Burrow, to get Jamar Chase and guys like that. And then you can add the free agent piece and things like that. But when you don't hit home runs and grand slams in your draft and you're floundering around and searching for people, you get stuck in the muck and the mire. So Jerry's completely wrong. Thomas Dimitrov didn't know his organization. The Rams weren't built by free agents when they were in the Super Bowl the first year. They parlayed that into being a Super Bowl champion. This is all revisionist history from all of these people that don't know what their organization is or don't really know what's going on. All right, we thank you for making Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery your first listen every day. Make sure you make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. Biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast from.